My guest is Dr. Ilse Kohler-Rollefson, who is a veterinarian who has earned a PhD in camel domestication. She has lived for 30 years among the Raika people who are camel herders in India and has written a new book entitled Hoofprints on the Land, How Traditional Herding and Grazing Can Restore the Soil and Bring Animal Agriculture Back in Balance with the Earth. Ilse, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing really well. Thanks so much. I'm very pleased to be here. And
I'm so happy to have you here. So happy to have you. Tell us about your career as a veterinarian and how you ended up in India studying camel domestication.
Well, it's kind of a long story, but so I studied veterinary medicine because I grew up with animals, horses, dogs, anything, and I loved animals. And so it was kind of the natural choice to become a veterinary doctor. But once I graduated, I realized that the profession wasn't really for me. I didn't like the large animal practice because it was already going towards industrialization. And I wasn't comfortable with doing small animal practice and looking after pets because it was, I just didn't have the social skills to do that at the time. So I also had a big interest in horses, actually, in racehorses studies. And I went to Kentucky, a racehorse farm called Claiborne Farm. And I didn't like how the horses were actually being used and exploited and just there for money. And so I felt I needed to do something different with my life. And I had one skill as a veterinarian. I had anatomical knowledge. So I could identify animal bones that are dug up on archaeological sites. So I became an archaeozoologist. I trained myself, basically. I worked in Jordan. There was a camel herd passing by every day. And I was fascinated by the way the Bedouin was interacting with the camels. You know, he was singing to them, and the camels were all very obedient and friendly. And I was just totally thrilled by that. So I started spending time with the Bedouin, and I really loved the way they were, their whole attitude to life. Even though I spoke only very little Arabic, but communication was possible on some level. And so I fell in love with camels, basically, and all the way they were handled and managed. So I wrote. Then, I mean, it was natural. Next step was to do my PhD on camel domestication. Mm-hmm. So for 10 years out of my life, I actually worked as an archaeozoologist in Jordan on various expeditions. And it was fun in many ways. But after some time, I felt I need to see real animals again, live animals. So I had opportunity to work to do some field work in Sudan. I did some field work only for a month, but I loved it. It was fantastic. I met the Rashida camel herders. It was perfect. And I wanted to really go back to Sudan and do more work there, but politically it got very difficult. I couldn't get back into the country. So at that time, India had the third largest camel population in the world, and there were fellowships available. I applied for one and I got one, and I didn't really have intention to stay in India for the rest of my life. But I wanted to go back to Africa. But then once I was here, I was totally gripped by the Raika community and again, their relationship to the camel.
Many people will be surprised to learn that domestic animals can have a positive impact on the land. How does this work?
All our ecological systems are like a symbiosis between plants and animals. So plants have that ability to do photosynthesis, so they can just absorb solar energy and build sugars and other chemical substances from it. And animals, they do not have that facility. So they need to move. I mean, it's inbuilt that they have to move, from one plant to the next. And they then, recycle also through their manure, etc. Again, the nutrients go back into the ground, and then, the microbes need it, and the microbes help the plants. I mean, it's a circular system. And that's actually what the Raika and other pastoralists are doing. I mean, they are mimicking natural systems in many ways. So we've made the mistake in the West that we have reversed the system. We are immobilizing the animals, And we are shipping the plants around the globe. You know, they are produced in North America, the soybeans in North America and South America, the soybeans and the corn, they get shipped from the US and Brazil to Vietnam and China and other places. And the animals are in one spot. So this is the crucial mistake that we have and that we need to reverse in order to make livestock keeping sustainable once again. And we do need more animals in the landscape. We need them to move around, and we have to work on moving back or forward to these kind of systems, mobile livestock systems.
So animals, correct me if I'm wrong, animals serve to distribute nutrients in a system, especially, you know, water flows downhill, so nutrients tend to flow downhill, but animals can walk uphill, so the animals can, you know, redistribute the nutrients. Plus their manure is home to so many microbes, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes. And so do animals serve to redistribute the nutrients?
And they also, they definitely redistribute the nutrients, but they also, you know, break down the energy. You know, if plants, you know, if they keep growing and growing, nobody's eating them, then, I mean, it's a prescription for fires breaking out. I mean, we absolutely, the animals need to disseminate the energy again. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I think we don't understand or don't apply in our world is that when a plant grows and then dies, there are about three things that are going to happen to it. It's either going to be eaten by an animal, or it's going to burn, or it's just going to die slowly and shade out and not really be properly the processed, you know. So if we have animals eating, then that's going to diminish the possibility of wildfire.
Absolutely, totally. I think a lot of wildfires are due to the fact that there's no animals grazing in the forest anymore. I mean, I see it here in India. I live next to Kumbhalgarh, the wildlife sanctuary, and the animals, the livestock not supposed to be there. So there's regular forest fires. The United States, there's huge demand for goats to graze and to browse and to just for the sole purpose of preventing forest fires. So it's turned into a business anyway. And I mean, people are, I've talked to one lady who has thousands of goats, and she has so many requests for her goats that she can't follow them. Yeah.
So can you say more? I have a list of issues here to talk about. Can you say more about each one of these? You know, can pastoralists help address sustainable food production? For one thing, let's just say that in your book, you say that there are 600 million people around the world who work and live as pastoralists. So that's about 7 or 8% of the population worldwide. It's kind of hidden, it's unknown. But can pastoralists have an important role to play in sustainable food production?
Absolutely. I mean, without pastoralists, the world would starve. And I mean, if you look at, you know, the world's agricultural land, actually only roughly 1/3 of that is suitable for crop production. 2/3 of the so-called agricultural land can only be used by means of livestock because there's not enough water, not enough rainfall, or the area, or it's too cold or too hot or too steep. So you can only use it for food production by means of livestock. And actually desert arid areas are usually export areas. They sustain the people who are living in the cities. And in African countries, most of African countries, livestock is a huge contributor to national economies and also to food security. And the same in many Asian countries as well, the drier Central Asia, India, and so on. And I mean, this idea that's being floated by the people who promote artificial meat and dairy, that that livestock should disappear from the planet by 2040 or something like that. It's absolutely it's ludicrous. It's totally ethnocentric for one thing. It's something, okay, maybe you're in New York or somewhere, you can do it, but you can't prescribe it for the rest of the planet. No way. We need the livestock. They will help us also to adapt to climate change. Livestock is much more resilient than most of the crops. So we definitely need livestock in the future, but we need it to be managed in a proper way. Livestock can also do a lot of damage. We know that, especially if you keep it in CAFOs, or what are they called?
CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operations.
So and that's the sad thing in that discussion about livestock, that it's so polarized that on one hand you have the people who say all livestock is bad, and then on the other hand you have the people who say all livestock is good. And I mean, never the twain shall meet, and we need to distinguish between the different kind of systems. So
right. Well, one thing is that there's a great deal of diversity among pastoralists, cultural diversity in terms of geography, and the prescriptions that are coming down from the United Nations and other interest groups, if you will, are kind of uniformity. Globalization is like you're wanting to kind of eradicate different cultures. If you look at the true effect of globalizations and uniform broad prescriptions like eliminate all livestock, it doesn't respect the diversity of different peoples or the diversity of the land that they're on. Like you said, some land is not suitable for crops. If 2/3 of agricultural land is not suitable for crops, then that 2/3, if it's going to grow food, it's going to be with animals.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's very valuable food. Also, I mean, the thing is with livestock is that they directly convert biodiversity or a biodiverse vegetation into food for humans. We do not have that intermediate stage that we have in crop cultivation, that we take out the native vegetation and then we till the land and we put in our seeds and we create monocultures. Crop cultivation is mostly monocultures, and if you have grazing livestock, that just doesn't happen. Plus, you don't need any fossil fuels. Nothing. I mean, these are solar-powered systems. I mean, they're God's gift to humanity in many ways.
So monocultures are problematic in that, a monoculture is monolithic, it's uniform, it's homogeneous, and it is at odds with the diversity of nature. So nature is diverse, a monoculture is uniform, that whatever space is being taken up by a uniform monoculture is going to be at odds with nature. Whereas you're talking about how pastoralists and their animals live in harmony with nature and its diversity and convert that into food. So,
yeah.
Well, okay. So, how can pastoralists help address climate change?
I think in two ways. I mean, one is there's climate adaptation and there's climate mitigation. And in terms of mitigation, I would say that because they don't rely on fossil fuels, that's already that's already great. I mean, systematic food production without fossil fuels is what is needed, basically. Of course, there is that big debate about the methane emissions from the ruminants, but the argument is being made that this is biogenic methane. It's being circulated. It comes from, it's part of that natural circle between, plants and animals and going back to the soil. So I think that argument is misguided, and also, I mean, people rethinking is happening. The other fact is that even though methane is has a pretty good warming effect. And the methane emissions will not increase from livestock unless we raise the number of ruminants, whereas fossil fuels just adds up. It keeps adding up, the CO2. So yeah, so there are a lot of things amiss with the that discussion on climate. And second, so that's climate change mitigation. Climate change adaptation is the fact that livestock, the kind of livestock that pastoralists keep, it has been selected for centuries or millennia to cope with harsh environments. So we need animals for livestock, for adaptation, definitely.
Right. Well, one thing that I hate to keep picking on the UN, it's kind of like that's where this official information comes from, and it supposedly has the legitimacy of science. And it's like, here's what scientists are saying, as if all scientists are saying this. But one thing I was going to say is that the focus is on emissions. So, you know, emissions like methane emissions, carbon dioxide emissions are in nature, it's one part of a cycle. And, you know, methane is part of nature, like you say, but the methane can be processed if we have functioning ecosystems.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, we can't you know, I mean, just the focus on climate and emission is not helping us. I mean, we need to look at the biodiversity as well, the biodiversity and functioning ecosystems. And actually, there is some kind of conflict even between green energy and land use and biodiversity, because the green energy takes up huge patches of land, and then collecting the energy also. It dissects the land, the roads have to be built, etc., etc. So
Absolutely.
it's more important, actually. I think the focus on biodiversity, on functioning ecosystem, that's what we need, and that can be done locally. I think, I mean, it's a case also for a lot of local action. But everybody's so fixated now on this climate angle. It's very difficult to get heard.
So next question, how can pastoralists help address land degradation?
Okay. No, I want to make it clear that, I mean, pastoralists as such, they are not in the business of addressing land degradation. So they have a different perspective than, I mean, the regenerative movement and the regenerative farmers. For them, I mean, the center of their interest is food production, sustainable livelihoods. So basically, I mean, they have been doing this for many generations, and they have, I mean, by keeping moving, they have prevented land degradation. And by being, you know, by grazing the animals and not going for crops, you know, creating monocultures, in that way, they are preventing land degradation. Also, they have a very important role in seed dispersal, and in they actually automatically kind of create forests. I've seen it with our camels. We kept them on a you know, on an empty field for a while, and now years later, a lot of acacia trees have just come up there. So they help germination and reseeding of trees, definitely. So if you want, and there's always a you know, you need to, you know, if you just want to regenerate land, I mean, that's one focus. And there might be some conflict with, you know, short-term livelihood issues or so. I mean, it might, you know, if you just want to regenerate land, then it might distract from the products or the output or the income that you have. Now we need to have a balance between them. I mean, if basically the pastoral systems are sound because they've been there for ages, and they have a lot of traditions and mechanisms also to ensure that the territory in which they move around is healthy and is used in a sustainable way. So they have techniques or systems for protecting certain grazing areas or for leaving them alone for a while. And I mean, just the fact that they keep moving is a big part of it. And the thing is also that they look at the, it's often the animals that decide to move. It's not the people who say we have to go, no? But the animals, if they don't like they get restless, they want to start migrating. So, and the animals know, I mean, if there's nothing to eat, then they have to move on, and then they're going to come back after a year or so. And in the meantime, the vegetation can regenerate.
It's interesting that the herds can help restore forests.
Yes.
So instead of
like
tree planting, a lot of greenwashing occurs
Absolutely.
In the name of tree planting. It's like people planting trees and drones planting trees. What we don't have enough of is trees planting trees and animals planting trees. A seed is much more likely to germinate, many seeds, if it goes through the gut of an animal.
Exactly.
And plus it comes with its own built-in fertilization. And that that manure the manure and the hoof prints tend to restore. So tell me about hoof prints. What's the positive effect of hoof prints?
So hoof prints, I mean, they're not always positive. They can also be negative if, animals are, too many animals are around a watering point or so. But basically, I mean, they do trample seeds into the soil, and they create like mini habitats. Many habitats, for instance, when it rains, they create these puddles in which are, the insects are, and which attract the birds. There are situations like that in India where buffaloes really help creating with their hoofs. They create these little pools and where the insects lay their eggs, and then the birds come and so on. So, I mean, but trampling is not always a positive. It can also have negative effects. I mean, it can lead to erosion also. But again, it's a question of animals not moving enough, of being in the same place for too long.
Right. So I've seen animals trample around a watering hole and how it creates it kills plants and creates erosion. Yeah. But if animals had a widespread positive effect, then that's going to restore water cycles, and there'd be more places for them to get their water.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. This is also an important point, that permanent pasture, permanent grasslands, they're like filters for the water quality. They have these enormous, long, deep root systems, and they filter everything. So they create very clean groundwater. Whereas if you have a cornfield or so, the water goes right through and it doesn't get cleaned or so. So it's the permanent pastures are very important for clean water.
Next
and
question.
They only permanent pastures also, they need to be grazed. They need to have that relationship with the hoofs and so on in order to stay permanent grasslands. And
right, so they eat vegetation that's otherwise just going to die and dry, and they trample it in, and that's good. Mostly that's good. It can be bad, but mostly it's good. So how can pastoralists and their herds help address the loss of biodiversity?
I mean, we've already mentioned it. I mean, the first thing is that they prevent the monoculture. So that's one point. Secondly, the manure in the landscape is an important attraction for insects, and where you have there's a huge relationship between areas being grazed by animals that don't, if they get antibiotics or dewormers, then it doesn't work. But normally these cow pads or so, they are like a bed for insects, and the insects are then the feed for the birds. So it's actually the absence of animals outside in the field that I think is very much responsible for that loss in insect population. That's for one thing. And also, I mean, in East Africa, we have reports that the animals are overnight, they're kept in bomas, in little shrub enclosures. And these bomas also are, they're also a hotbed of biodiversity, of nurturing all kinds of animals, small animals, and then bigger animals. And in East Africa, there are many examples actually of livestock coexisting with wildlife. Where I live, wildlife sanctuary for leopards, and most of the diet of the leopards is actually goat and sheep. So if you would take the pastoralists away, those leopards wouldn't have anything to eat anymore. And the pastoralists, they totally accept this to some extent. I mean, if it gets too bad, that's another issue. But basically, they say, okay, the leopard also has the right to eat. So fine, they're totally stoic about this.
Okay. Next question: how can pastoralists and their herds help address misguided diets?
So misguided diets, yes. So if you, it all goes back to what the pastoralist animals eat. So they eat all, this biodiverse vegetation. In the case of the camel here, there's the word of mouth, or traditional thinking says they eat 36 different species. And these plants are full of phytochemicals, which we actually need. Humans need them. And a lot of our health problems are due to the fact that we have a very simple diet in many ways. And it all goes back to corn, and it's corn that's produced with a lot of fertilizer and all that. So our food items are they've become empty, of a lot. They don't no longer contain phytochemicals, and so our diets have become impoverished. And because of this lack of these phytochemicals, that's what actually makes people keep eating. They don't get satiated anymore from the normal food, because it doesn't have phytochemicals in it. So a lot of some research is being done in the United States, comparing the composition of beef from free-range systems and in feedlots. And I've talked to Stephen Van Vliet. He's one of the nutritional experts who's working on this, and he said, I mean, those two types of beef, they're like apples and oranges. I mean, they're not the same thing. They have absolutely no resemblance on. So eating products from animals that graze a wide diversity of vegetation, I think it's absolutely good for your health.
Right. So plants are rich with, this is not my specialty, but phytochemicals, secondary metabolic compounds, yes, exactly, that help the plant. They help protect the plant. They give the plant its aroma and its flavor. And when an animal digests these, then many of those chemicals are, go into their tissues to help their nutrition, and that can be passed on to the person who eats the meat. Tell me about antimicrobial resistance. How can pastoralists and their herds help? What is antimicrobial resistance, and how?
Well, so antimicrobial resistance is the fact that a lot of antibiotics don't work anymore, and this is to a large extent due to the fact that animals in feedlots are routinely given, at least in the US. In Europe, it's the legal situation is different, but they are routinely given antibiotics. One reason is because they're also like a growth promoter, apparently.
Right.
But secondly, also because they are kept in unhygienic, unhealthy, unhappy circumstances. I mean, they're cramped together in these feedlots. They get a monotonous diet. They have no fun, basically. I mean, they can't move around very much. So under these circumstances, animals are not healthy. And that the thing about pastoralists is that they do, the animals, they have to walk every day. They're in their natural social systems. It's all females with one male, females with their offspring. So, I mean, they can live almost as if they were in the wild, but with the benefit of human protection. So these animals, they also sometimes they need antibiotics, but rarely. It's not part of the system. So, if we want to do something about decreasing antimicrobial resistance, we need to keep our animals in healthy systems where they can move and live a healthy life. Products from unhealthy, unhappy animals are also not good for people. It's very simple, actually.
Right. So you also talk about how camel milk can be good for diabetes and autism. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I mean, it's a little bit controversial because there haven't been any double-blind tests or so. But I mean, there are a good number of cases of autistic children which respond very well to camel milk. They get better, make better eye contact, they sleep better, they start, their verbal abilities increase. And there's one American lady, Christina Adams, she experienced such dramatic differences in her autistic son that she's written a book about it, and she's the promoter globally of using camel milk for autism. But a lot of mothers are using camel milk, and it may have something, nobody knows why. I mean, there's a lot of speculation. Some of it might be due actually that children they can't take cow milk, and camel milk is generally compatible also with lactose intolerant people. And there have been studies on children and autism and camel milk from Saudi Arabia by a Saudi woman professor, but they're not taken serious because the research is done in Saudi Arabia. Yeah,
right.
I also don't want to say that camel milk helps all autistic children, because autism is also wide spectrum. So I think in some cases it might work very well, in others it doesn't. Now, regarding diabetes, there are scientific studies which do show that people who take camel milk regularly, they can decrease the intake of insulin to a significant extent. So, and these studies are fairly well backed up. There's a professor in India who's done a lot of research on this. So it definitely does help to some extent. It's not a cure, because diabetes, again, it's also, a disease or an ailment. It has a lot to do with your lifestyle, your weight and whether you have exercise and all these things. So camel milk can help, but you need to change other things in your life as well. But what we've also seen, so we actually distribute camel milk for free here to poor tribal children and to other poor people who have health problems and can't afford medicine, or some of them have been given up by doctors. So we have a tuberculosis patient who had been given up by doctors. He consumed camel milk for several months, and now he's almost back to normal. He can do fairly heavy work, and he looks like a healthy human being. We have other cases also. Diabetes, people had gangrene from diabetes. They took from diabetes. They took camel milk. They are cured. so, I mean, we have a collection of case studies in which camel milk really seems to have made a difference. And also, yeah, people who were very weak before, who couldn't walk, after taking camel milk for a while, they are again mobile. So, I mean, this is not enough to convince scientists, but I do believe that, you know, the collection of anecdotal evidence, it makes a case. I mean, there's something to it, that's for sure. And it's also because, I mean, it's, you know, the normal milk you get in the shop, it's like standardized, it's homogenized, it's has a certain fat content or no fat or so. Whereas we, you know, we just take the camel milk as it is, nothing added, nothing removed. And I think that also makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. I was interested to learn that mobile livestock produces 53% of India's milk and 74% of India's meat. So it would stand to reason that if mobile livestock were eliminated, it would adversely impact the access of Indians to meat and milk.
Oh, totally, absolutely. No. So yeah, yes, and the unfortunate part is that this hasn't been visible. Because in the official thinking, pastoralists do not exist. The view of an animal scientist, they only see, or with them registered, only animals that are stall-fed or on a farm, and the ones that are moving around, that just doesn't count. Mm-hmm. But over the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, I'm working with a lot of colleagues in India, and they all, I mean, pastoralists are all over India, from the Himalayas down to the south. So India is an agro-pastoralist, dominated by an agro-pastoralist system in which farmers actually depend on the moving pastoralists to supply with manure, and also to remove some of the crop residues or some weeds that are bad for the farmer. So, for instance, here, my personal experience, there's after cultivation, there's a thistle growing, a big thistle, Indian globe thistle, and it spreads all over the field, and the farmers hate it. But the camels love it, and they come into the field and they eat those thistles. And they convert them into it makes the milk really sweet. So it makes the milk sweet, and at the same time, the camels also provide the organic manure. So it's a perfect system. So basically, the camels, they get a second harvest out of the same piece of land. Mm-hmm. It's terrific, really. But this hasn't been. See, because animal scientists are focused just on production, on output versus input. Now, how much feed do I put in, and how much meat and milk do I get out? And they are kind of blinkered to all the other aspects of the system, unfortunately.
Well, Vandana Shiva says that we should not measure yield per acre. We should measure nutrition per acre.
That's definitely very true. Yeah. Mm.
You have said, I think I saw you on a video saying this, you have said that chemical fertilizers cause the land to become sterile, whereas the fertilizer, compare that to the fertilizer that comes from manure. India's 64 million sheep produce 15 billion rupees worth of organic fertilizer, i.e. manure, every year. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very rough calculation. Yeah, so I mean, this is actually, so I'm not a crop scientist or a farmer or anything, but we started talk. I mean, when we were following the migratory sheep herds, we always had a chance to also talk to the farmers on whose land they were staying, and they were, I mean, all of them were saying that the chemical fertilizer makes the soil go hard. That's what they say, hard. And the manure of the sheep makes a huge difference to the crops that they get. So this was basically the start. And then I mean, we have a network of researchers spread out to India, and they were also making calculations and investigations. So we pooled our information and we came up with that figure, and it's out in the open, and I'm always waiting for somebody to say, oh, this is rubbish or so, but nobody has come up. So I challenge everybody else to maybe come up with a better calculation or so. But it's so the value of the pastoralist livestock, I mean, the manure is maybe the biggest contribution that they make to India's food security. Mm-hmm. It's also, apart from that, it's also a huge source of income, often for women farmers, actually, that they make money from manure. The manure trade is usually in the hand of women. That's something is totally overlooked by the official research system.
Right. Tell us about livestock keepers' rights. You've been a pioneer and a leader in that field. What has the United Nations done for the rights of livestock herders, and what kind of help do pastoralists need from us?
So, so this concept of livestock keepers' rights, it came up in the early 2000s when the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations became concerned about the loss of genetic diversity, because the large diversity of livestock breeds, about 7,000 or so altogether globally, they were decreasing tremendously because they were all being replaced by Holstein Friesen cows and hybrid pigs and so on. So at that time, the governments, the international community, they wanted to do something about this stopping that erosion of diversity. So there was a process where they met every year to discuss what to do and so on, and they never actually discussed the role of pastoralists and of those people who keep animals in natural environments, their role in the conservation of these breeds. If nobody's keeping these breeds, nobody's willing to do it, then these breeds become extinct. But the focus of those conversations, these official dialogues, was only on technicalities, on keeping, doing cryoconservation, establishing seed banks for, and nobody really cared. I mean, that the fact that the pastoralist livestock keepers are being stopped from keeping livestock, stopped from making living, also automatically, contributes to the loss of the diversity. And so that's why we came up there. At that time, there was something called farmers' rights developed in the crop sector. So which gave farmers the rights to distribute their seeds and so on. And it recognized their role in conservation. So we came up with this concept of livestock keepers' rights, and we actually mobilized herders from many countries. We had a series of meetings. We went to the big international conference, and we developed this concept of livestock really elaborately, and it had a lot of backing from many pastoralist groups throughout the world. But at that UN level conference, the developed countries, they didn't want this. Africa was supporting this, but the developed countries were against this. So livestock keepers' rights, basically, it's a set of 7 or 8 types of rights or privileges, saying that without the livestock keepers, we cannot conserve biodiversity. That in order to do that, they need access to their customary grazing grounds, that they have a lot of traditional knowledge. That was also, I mean, the scientists didn't realize that it's pastoralists and livestock keepers who have created the breeds. No scientist has ever created a valid or functioning breed. It's all that diversity has all been created by pastoralists and other livestock keepers over the centuries. And so that recognition was actually the kind of the core of the livestock keepers' rights. And then there were also other aspects of that they can make their own breeding decisions, because often that's the thing. I mean, it's the governments who have actually hindered the biodiversity or eroded it by only going for that production aspect. Just always just promoting the highest yielding breeds and not the ones that are the best suited to use the environment. So unfortunately, livestock keepers' rights, and it was kind of, because there wasn't an international process in which we could embed it, we kind of stopped working on it. But now I think maybe the time is ripe again because of all that antagonism towards livestock. So in my opinion, I don't care, the industrial livestock keeping has to go, but we need those people who manage livestock as part of the landscape. We need them, they need our support, and these livestock keepers' rights would be an approach to ensure that support.
Do you like your work?
I do, yes. Absolutely, no. And I like, so, at the international level, making progress is very time consuming. I mean, you go to so many meetings, but then, like they do at the climate conference, and they're going to do at the UN, the CBD now that's coming up, it's then all about, the words and the commas in the text of the official resolution. I mean, it doesn't go very far, but locally, I'm happy that here in India, or for our camels, because we've set up this dairy, we support the camel system in our area is doing well. The Raika have income, and we have the milk to give to sell to autistic parents of autistic children, and also to give for free to poor people. And so there is I can see some practical effect of it. So that makes me happy. Yes.
If you were a benevolent dictator of the world, what policies would you want to put in place?
If I was a benevolent dictator, so I would stop all CAFOs. I would, I would put in place a regulation about that you can only keep as many animals as land and vegetation is available for them. That's one thing I would definitely do. Well, I need to think about that.
Do you have any parting thoughts? What else would you like for our audience to know? What have we not talked about?
I think we've talked about almost everything. Would you like, should I run you through some slides? Actually, I think I had some. Do we still have time?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Where is it here? Yeah, so I was actually I just wanted to show that, where we are here in India at the border, with Pakistan, in that's a desert area, the Thar Desert. And this picture was taken 31 years ago when I first got introduced to the Raika, and I was floored by their relationship. And that little boy, he had to go to the city the next day to earn money. Yeah, now he has come back. And let me just slideshow this. Okay. See, this is a male camel. It's a male breeding camel, and they can be very, very dangerous if they're not treated properly. And here, I see it every day, this close relationship, and it keeps fascinating me. And my camels are also so friendly. They come and they give me a little nudge, and that just makes me happy. And it's not just about camels, it's also about the Raika. Also, the majority of them actually have sheep. And their whole life, it just circulates around having their animals be happy. And that they say that also. No? If our animals are happy, we are happy too. We don't need to. So this is the area where I live. This is the wildlife sanctuary for leopards, and where animals are not allowed, but they still come in. So this is like could be my own camel herd. In the monsoon season, they have to graze in the forest because it's the only place where they can go as the fields are being cultivated at that time. And these are Raika, these are shepherds on migration. So they move in like a big number of families, maybe 12, 15 families, they move together. And they have camels, they have sheep, goats, dogs, and yeah. So this is the famous camel milk we have, and yeah, and these are the 36 species that the camels are eating. The milk. And how we ship it frozen through the rest of the country. Oh no, what's going on? And these are the livestock keepers' rights. I mean, so these are to support indigenous and ecological livestock keepers and to support ecologically and socially sustainable livestock development. So, I mean, there's been a huge, long struggle for fighting for rights. And even in 2000, I mean, it was not allowed to sell camel milk because they were saying it's hazardous to human health, when it's maybe the most healthy food you can take. So we've had a long history of struggle. And then we have developed this, there's a tool under the Convention on Biological Diversity for communities to document their own knowledge and genetic resources. So we've also worked on that, supported communities in Kenya, in India, and Pakistan to develop these protocols. But even though they're an official tool under the CBD, they hardly get any attention. Yeah, and this is the map of India, showing all the pastoralist groups all over the country. And this is the bioculture protocols. And for the Raika, we had one, and we went to with this Raika lady to Montreal to the CBD secretariat and handed over that bioculture protocol. So we've done everything, and it doesn't change anything. But what makes me happy is that we are, this is our tiny camel dairy. So we've created a win-win-win situation. Every day we distribute 10 liters of camel milk for free, and so we create income for herders. The camel numbers have increased in our area, and we provide healthy nutrition for undernourished people. See, these are some of the kids. They love that camel milk when they get it in the morning. They all come running. And this is also something, actually, if you want to know about the significance of pastoralists, we have, my organization, we have a pastoralist map on which 700 pastoralist or ecological livestock keeping groups are already entered in there. I could show you that too. Okay.
Is there a way for people to get in touch with you and or support your organization?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sure. Maybe we can. Yeah, I mean, we have, so my organization in Germany, or the one that does the international advocacy, is called the League for Pastoral Peoples. So we have a website, www.pastoralpeoples.org. And in India also we have a social enterprise to market the camel milk. It's called camelcharisma.com, and one can buy camel milk and for free distribution to poor people. We can't ship it anywhere. We can't ship it to the US, the camel milk. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Not allowed to ship it to the US?
No, we can't. It's not allowed. No, not to the EU, or so the regulations are just much strict.
Okay.
But there's a big market in India, and I think we'll get there eventually. Yeah. So.
Well, Ilse Kohler-Rollefson, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I hope it has contributed to some understanding of the significance of pastures throughout the world, and that there are ecological ways of keeping livestock in tune with nature and for sustainable food production. Thank you very much.
Fascinating topic, a very, very important topic for so many reasons, not just important for the people who are affected directly, but it's a very important topic, I think, for the ecology of the world, the way the world is governed, and I had a third thing, the ecological health, governance, the humaneness. How does the major governments of the world and the major corporations of the world and the international community and the United Nations, how are they going to relate to people who are in some respects at the margins, but in some respects they're at the center of what is going right? You know, that globalization it means homogenization. They call it harmonization, but harmonization means do what we say or else, you know, but anyway, but I digress. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Well, you're
Have
welcome.
a wonderful
Bye.
day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.